Frank Holloway stood tall as he polished the glass case that held a pristine M1 Garand rifle from World War II. At 52 years old, the former Marine Corps weapons specialist had found peace working as the curator of the National Firearms Museum. His weathered hands moved with care over each display, treating the historical weapons with the respect they deserved. The call from the government had surprised him. First contact with an alien species, and they wanted him to showcase human weapons. Technology. Frank wasn't sure why they picked him, but orders were orders, even for a retired Marine. "Mr. Holloway, they're waiting for you in the main hall," said Lisa Bennett, who had arrived to escort him. Lisa worked for Earth Space Command as head of diplomatic relations. She had a serious look that matched her crisp blue uniform. "These Proximans are very interested in our military history. The president thinks showing them our past might help build trust." Frank nodded but said nothing. In his experience, showing strangers your weapons wasn't about trust. The main hall of the Global Unity building sparkled with decorations for the historic meeting. Flags from nations around the world hung from the ceiling. Government officials in formal clothes talked in nervous groups. In the center waited 3 tall, blue-skinned aliens. Commander Zixvor stood 7 feet tall with 4 arms and skin that shimmered like polished metal. 2 smaller aliens flanked him, their eyes constantly moving, taking in every detail of the room. "Ah, the weapons historian has arrived," Zixvor said through a translator device on his chest. His voice sounded smooth but with an odd metallic echo. "We are eager to learn about your species' methods of defense and warfare." Frank wheeled in a cart covered with a black cloth. "Just a small sample of our history," he said with a polite smile. "Nothing current, of course." President Clark nodded from across the room. The diplomats had been clear. Show the aliens historical weapons only. Nothing that revealed current military capabilities. Frank pulled away the cloth to reveal a timeline of human firearms, from an 18th century flintlock pistol to a Vietnam-era M16. "These are chemical propellant weapons," Frank explained, picking up the flintlock. "This one is from about 400 years ago. It uses a spark to ignite powder, which creates gas that pushes a lead ball through the barrel." The aliens leaned in, their large eyes blinking rapidly. "Fascinating," said Zixvor, though his tone suggested otherwise. "You mean your species relied on controlled explosions to launch projectiles? How quaint," one of the smaller aliens whispered. Something, and they all made a sound like metal wind chimes, their version of laughter. Frank kept his face neutral but noticed how the aliens' eyes lingered on each weapon, how they asked about range, stopping power, and production methods. These weren't questions from curious tourists. "And this?" Zixvor picked up the M1911 pistol with one of his 4 hands. "Still using solid projectiles, I see." "Yes," Frank said. "That design is over 250 years old, but versions of it remained in service for nearly a century. Simple, reliable." Zixvor hefted the pistol, clearly surprised by its weight. So inefficient, so primitive. He set it down with what looked like disgust. "Our youngest civilizations abandoned such methods thousands of years ago. Would you care to show us your weapons? Technology?" Frank asked innocently. The alien commander stiffened. "That would not be appropriate at this stage of cultural exchange." Frank nodded. "Of course. However," Zixvor added, activating a device on his wrist. A hologram appeared, showing what looked like a small pistol. "This is a personal defense tool from our history museum. It fires a stream of plasma that disassembles matter at the molecular level." The hologram showed the weapon firing at a target, which vanished in a flash of blue light. "Impressive," Frank said, keeping his tone even. "When is this from in your history?" "About 12,000 of your Earth years ago. A child's toy by our current standards." More chiming laughter from the aliens. Several human diplomats shifted uncomfortably. Lisa stepped forward. "Perhaps we could move on to the cultural exhibits. We have prepared displays of Earth art and music." "In a moment," Zixvor said, his eyes still fixed on the firearms. "Your species seems particularly focused on weaponry. Most of your historical artifacts appear to be instruments of war." Frank shrugged. "We preserve what teaches us about ourselves, good and bad." "Yes, the alien commander said slowly. Most illuminating. Throughout the rest of the afternoon, Frank watched the aliens carefully. They showed polite interest in human art, cuisine, and science, but their energy changed whenever military topics arose. HFY asked about Earth's defense systems, spacecraft capabilities, and global military structure, always under the guise of cultural exchange. That evening, after the aliens had returned to their ship in orbit, Frank found Lisa in the building's garden, looking up at the stars. "Something's not right," he said without preamble. Lisa sighed. "I know. The questions they asked, the way they scanned everything. They're not diplomats," Frank said flatly. "Or not just diplomats. I've seen that behavior before, in combat zones. They're sizing us up." "For what? What do you think?" Frank looked up at the pinpoint of light that was the alien ship. "I spent 30 years reading enemy intentions. Those aliens were recording defensive capabilities, mapping facilities, assessing threat levels. You think they're planning to attack us?" Lisa's voice dropped to a whisper. "I think they're keeping their options open. And I think they believe we'd be an easy conquest." 3 days later, the Proximan delegation abruptly announced their departure, citing irreconcilable cultural differences that made further diplomatic relations impossible at this time. As their shuttle prepared to leave, Commander HFY approached Frank at the landing pad. "Your museum of weapons was most educational," the alien said. "It helps us understand your species' development stage." Frank nodded. "Sometimes the old ways have advantages you don't expect until it's too late." The alien commander's eyes narrowed, slightly. "Indeed. Well, perhaps one day we will return and see how your old ways have progressed." As the alien shuttle lifted off toward their mothership, Frank watched with growing unease. In his gut, he knew they would be back, and not for diplomacy. "What did he say to you?" Lisa asked, joining him as the shuttle disappeared into the clouds. "Nothing direct," Frank replied. "But we need to prepare. I think Earth just got sized up for an invasion." "Based on what? A feeling?" Frank turned to her with grave eyes. "Based on 30 years of knowing when someone is measuring you for a coffin." As they walked back to the building, Frank's mind was already turning to the old weapons in his museum. The aliens had laughed at them, dismissed them as primitive. Perhaps, he thought, that arrogance might be their weakness. 3 months after the Proximans left Earth, Frank Holloway woke to the sound of emergency sirens. His phone buzzed with an alert message. "All former military personnel report to nearest command center." Frank dressed quickly and drove to the Io City emergency bunker. The streets were filled with scared people looking up at the sky. When he arrived at the bunker, armed guards checked his ID and rushed him inside. In the command center, dozens of screens showed the same thing. Large alien ships entering Earth's orbit. Proximans, just as Frank had feared. "Holloway over here," called a voice. Captain Diane Rodriguez waved him over to a table where several military officers stood around a holographic display. "Captain," Frank nodded. "Looks like our alien friends came back." "And not to chat," said Rodriguez. She was a tough, no-nonsense commander of Earth's 3rd Defense Brigade. "The Proximans dropped all pretense of diplomacy. They're demanding Earth surrender immediately." A tall, stern-looking man joined them. "Mr. Holloway, I'm General Keith Mason, Earth Defense Command. Your warning 3 months ago was the only reason we had any preparation time at all." Frank frowned. "What's their position?" General Mason gestured to the hologram. 23 ships in orbit. They've already taken out our satellite defense grid with some kind of energy pulse. Our orbital platforms are dead." "Casualties?" Frank asked. "Minimal so far. They want the planet intact," Rodriguez explained. "But they've started landing troops outside major cities." A new alert flashed on the screens. Live footage showed alien dropships landing in a field. Doors opened and out marched soldiers in gleaming armor. Each alien soldier was at least 7 feet tall. Their armor shimmered with a faint blue glow. "Those are personal shields," said a technician, pointing at the blue glow. Our first response teams tried engaging them with standard energy weapons. No effect at all. The footage showed human soldiers firing energy rifles at the aliens. The blue shield simply absorbed the blasts. The aliens returned fire with weapons that shot streams of blue light. Wherever the light touched, humans and equipment simply disappeared. Disintegration weapons, Frank muttered. Just like Zixvor showed us. General Mason looked grim. We're outmatched. Our best weapons can't penetrate their shields. Frank studied the footage carefully. Who's leading the alien forces? A different screen showed a larger Proximan in ornate armor. That's High General Kavar, Rodriguez said. Their communications identified him as the invasion commander. What defenses do we have left? Frank asked. Conventional military forces, some experimental weapons systems, General Mason replied. But if our energy weapons can't penetrate, they're shields. Frank was quiet for a moment, thinking. When I showed Zixvor our firearms museum, he dismissed them as primitive. They laughed at solid projectile weapons. And, Rodriguez asked, and what if their shields are designed only to stop energy weapons? What if they're so advanced they don't even bother defending against physical projectiles anymore? General Mason frowned. You think bullets might work where energy beams fail? It's worth trying, Frank said. Do we have any conventional firearms available? Some. Police forces still use them, and there are reserves in military storage, Rodriguez answered. But most of our frontline troops are equipped with energy weapons now. Frank turned to General Mason. Sir, I need permission to test a theory. And if I'm right, we need to access military museums and historical weapon caches. Fast. General Mason hesitated only briefly before nodding. Do it. We're out of options anyway. Within hours, Frank was at a secure testing facility with a captured piece of Proximan shield technology. The small device had been recovered from a damaged alien dropship and still generated a working shield. Frank set up simple tests. First, he fired an energy pistol at the shield. The beam was absorbed completely. Then he tried a standard military laser rifle. Again, no effect. Finally, Frank loaded an old Colt .45 pistol. He aimed carefully and pulled the trigger. The loud bang echoed through the room. The bullet sailed straight through the shield and embedded itself in the wall behind. I'll be damned, whispered Rodriguez, who had come to watch the test. Frank set up more tests with different firearms. Pistols, rifles, shotguns, all fired solid bullets that passed through the alien shield as if it wasn't there. Frank called General Mason immediately. Sir, I was right. Their shields stop energy weapons but not physical projectiles. They've evolved beyond ballistic protection because no advanced civilization would use something so primitive anymore. General Mason's voice was urgent. How quickly can we deploy conventional firearms? Not quickly enough for everyone, Frank replied. But I have another idea. Get me clearance to access the National War Museum, and I need a team of engineers and gunsmiths. 2 days later, as Proximan, forces advanced toward the city, Frank stood before a group of skeptical soldiers. Behind him were crates of weapons that looked like they belonged in a history book. These are M16 rifles from the 21st century, Frank explained, holding one up. Simple, reliable, and most importantly, they fire physical bullets that will pass right through Proximan shields. A soldier raised his hand. Sir, with respect, these are antiques. Antiques that will keep you alive, Frank replied. The Proximans built their defenses against enemies with technology like theirs. They never expected to face weapons they consider obsolete. Captain Rodriguez stepped forward. I've seen the tests myself. These will work when our energy weapons won't. The soldiers looked doubtful, but took the weapons. Each was given a crash course in operating the firearms and several magazines of ammunition. That night, the first test of Frank's theory came when a Proximan patrol entered the city outskirts. A squad of humans armed with the antique weapons waited in ambush. The alien soldiers walked confidently, their shields glowing blue in the darkness. They had faced human resistance before and found it ineffective. The squad leader gave the signal. 10 rifles fired at once. The Proximans were caught completely by surprise. Their shields did nothing to stop the bullets. 3 aliens fell immediately. The others looked around in confusion, unable to understand what had hit them. More gunfire erupted. Within minutes, the entire Proximan patrol was eliminated. Frank received the report with grim satisfaction. "It worked," he told General Mason. "Now we need more weapons, a lot more." "Where will we get them?" Mason asked. "Every museum, gun collection, and old military storage facility on Earth," Frank replied. "And we need to restart ammunition production immediately." As word of the successful ambush spread, a spark of hope ignited among Earth's defenders. The Proximans had laughed at human firearms. They weren't laughing now. Word spread quickly through Earth's remaining military forces. The old weapons worked. Within a week, Frank Holloway found himself in charge of a special unit. The soldiers called themselves the Antiquarians, a name Frank liked for its irony. "This doesn't make any sense," said Major Jack Collins, the officer assigned to oversee Frank's unit. He watched as soldiers trained with bolt-action rifles and pump shotguns. "We're fighting an alien invasion with museum pieces." Frank checked the sight on an old hunting rifle. Sometimes the simplest answer is the best one. The Proximans built defenses against what they thought we would use, not what we could use. Major Collins frowned. He was a career officer who had spent his life working with the newest military technology. Using weapons from hundreds of years ago felt wrong to him. "We've got reports of Proximan units advancing toward the old highway," said a communications officer. "They're about 5 miles out." Frank nodded. "Time to test our new old strategy. Amy, you're up." Sergeant Amy Winters stepped forward. Before the invasion, she had been a champion sport shooter. Now she carried a restored M40 sniper rifle from the 20th century. "I know this spot," Amy said, looking at the map. "There's a water tower with good visibility of the highway." Frank turned to Major Collins. "Your call, sir." Collins hesitated, then nodded. "Do it. But I'm going with you to observe." The small team moved out, reaching the water tower before the alien patrol arrived. Amy climbed to the top with her rifle while Frank Collins and 2 other soldiers watched from a hidden position below. 5 targets approaching from the east. Amy's voice came through their radios. "Moving in standard patrol formation." Frank watched through binoculars. 5 tall Proximan soldiers walked confidently down the highway. Their blue shields glowed in the evening light. "These look like commanders," Frank said quietly. "See the markings on their armor?" Major Collins nodded but said nothing. "I have a shot," Amy whispered through the radio. "Take it," Frank ordered. The sharp crack of the rifle broke the silence. One of the Proximan soldiers fell immediately, a hole through its helmet. The other aliens froze, then began scanning frantically with their equipment. Their shields brightened as they powered up to maximum strength. Amy fired again. Another alien dropped. "They can't locate her," Frank said to Collins. "They're looking for energy signatures, not an old rifle." The remaining 3 Proximans began firing their energy weapons randomly, trying to find their attacker. Amy remained perfectly still, lined up her 3rd shot, and fired again. Another alien fell. The last 2 Proximans took cover behind an abandoned car. Amy waited patiently. When one peered around the edge, she fired again. The final alien commander made a run for it, sprinting toward a cluster of trees. Amy tracked it with her scope, exhaled slowly, and pulled the trigger. The alien fell mid-stride. 5 shots, 5 kills, Frank said into the radio. "Good work, Sergeant." When Amy climbed down from the water tower, Major Collins looked at her with new respect. "I wouldn't have believed it if I hadn't seen it myself." Back at base, news of the successful operation spread rapidly. Similar reports came in from around the world as resistance fighters discovered the effectiveness of conventional firearms against the alien invaders. In the Alien Command Center, Sub-Commander Talaria reviewed the reports with growing concern. She was a tall, slender Proximan with silvery blue skin and the distinctive forearms of her species. "Another patrol lost," she said to her intelligence officer. "No survivors, no warning signals." "It doesn't make sense," the officer replied. "Their energy signatures don't match any known human weapon. We've analyzed the impact sites and found small metal objects." Talaria picked up one of the recovered bullets. What is this primitive technology? Our historians believe these are from early projectile weapons, similar to what was displayed during first contact. Talaria's eyes widened. The museum pieces? They're using museum pieces against us? It appears so, Commander. Our shields are calibrated to stop energy weapons, not physical objects moving at high velocity. Can we adapt our shields? The officer looked uncomfortable. It would require a complete redesign. Our civilization abandoned protection against physical projectiles thousands of years ago. We have no defense protocols in our systems. Talaria slammed her hand on the table. Capture some humans. Find out what they're planning. Meanwhile, Frank's team grew as more soldiers were trained in using the old weapons. Gun collectors volunteered their arsenals, museums opened their vaults, and old military storage facilities were raided for anything that could fire a physical bullet. We need a name for this operation, General Mason said during a strategy meeting. Operation Antique, Frank suggested, because sometimes the oldest tools are the best ones for the job. Amy Winters had trained 30 new snipers by the end of the week. Major Collins, no longer skeptical, helped coordinate attacks on Proximan patrols across the region. They're adapting, Frank warned during an evening briefing. They've started sending out larger patrols and using more cover. They know something's wrong even if they don't understand what. Then we adapt too, said Captain Rodriguez. Guerrilla tactics. Hit and run. We use their arrogance against them. That night, 5 teams of humans armed with vintage weapons attacked Proximan outposts simultaneously. By morning, the aliens had lost over 100 soldiers and still had no effective defense against the bullets that passed through their shields as if they weren't there. In her command center, Sub-Commander Talaria received word that captured humans were ready for questioning. She entered the interrogation room where 3 human soldiers sat bound to chairs. "Tell me about your new weapons technology," she demanded. The prisoners looked at each other confused. "What new technology?" one asked. "The weapons that can penetrate our shields," Talaria said, her patience wearing thin. One of the humans actually laughed. "Those aren't new. They're hundreds of years old." Talaria's translator must have malfunctioned. "Explain." "Your shields stop energy weapons," the soldier said slowly as if speaking to a child. "They don't stop bullets. Simple as that." "Bullets," Talaria repeated the unfamiliar word. "Metal projectiles, like the ones in the museum you visited. The ones your people laughed at." Talaria felt a cold sensation spread through her body. The Proximans had dismissed human firearms as primitive, obsolete technology. Now those same primitive weapons were decimating their forces and they had no immediate defense against them. She left the room without another word and contacted High General Kavar's flagship in orbit. "We have a problem," she began. 1 month into the invasion, the tide began to turn. Humans around the world now knew the secret. Old weapons worked against Proximan shields. Frank Holloway found himself promoted to the position of Chief Strategic Advisor for Earth's defense. Forces. High General Kavar glared at the holographic display showing Earth's surface. Red dots marked areas where Proximans had lost control. "This was supposed to be a simple conquest," Kavar growled. His forearms gripped the edge of the table tightly. "Their world should have fallen within days." "The humans are using primitive weapons technology, sir," Sub-Commander Talaria explained. "Their bullets are physical objects that pass through our energy shields." Kavar slammed his fist down. "Then change the shields, adapt." "Our engineers are working on it, but our systems were never designed to stop solid projectiles. We haven't needed such protection for thousands of years." In the Earth Defense Force headquarters, Frank met with General Diane Rodriguez, recently promoted after successfully defending 3 major cities. They stood around a table covered with maps and reports. "The Proximans are pulling back from urban areas." Rodriguez pointed to several markers on the map. "They're consolidating their forces here and here." Frank nodded. "They're realizing that their technological advantage isn't working. Now they're trying to adapt." Major Collins entered. The room with a woman Frank didn't recognize. "Mr. Holloway, this is Dr. Ellen Parker. She's been working on something you should see." Dr. Parker was a weapons researcher with intense eyes and quick movements. We've been studying Proximan technology from captured equipment, she said, placing a small device on the table. And we found a way to create hybrid weapons. The device looked like a simple metal tube with wires wrapped around it. This is a basic railgun, Dr. Parker explained. It uses electromagnetic force to fire physical projectiles at extremely high speeds. We already know bullets work, Collins said. How is this different? Because this combines our knowledge of their technology with our old designs, Dr. Parker said. It's untraceable by their scanners, but delivers a punch 10 times stronger than conventional firearms. And we can mass produce them using parts from their own damaged equipment. Frank picked up the prototype. How many can you make? With the right resources, thousands within weeks. General Rodriguez made the decision immediately. Do it. And what about their ships? We still can't touch them in orbit. Dr. Parker smiled. That's phase 2. We're developing what we call retrograde missiles, stripped of all electronic guidance but deadly accurate against vessels that have no defense against physical impacts. As Dr. Parker's team worked, Frank continued training new recruits in using conventional weapons. The Proximans tried to adapt their shields but struggled with the concept of physical projectile defense. It was simply too foreign to their advanced technology. High General Kavar grew increasingly frustrated. His reports to the Proximan Empire were filled with excuses that sounded absurd, an advanced civilization being defeated by primitive weapons technology. Launch a final offensive, Kavar ordered. Full force, all units, crush their resistance before they can spread their advantage further. Proximan forces gathered for a massive attack on Earth's remaining strongholds. Kavar deployed their most advanced combat walkers, 30-foot-tall machines armed with multiple disintegrator cannons and protected by the strongest shields available. Earth's defenders prepared as best they could. Frank inspected a line of soldiers armed with a mixture of old and new weapons. They're sending everything they have, he told them. But remember, they still haven't solved their main problem. Their shields don't stop bullets. The battle began at dawn. Proximan walkers stomped across open fields toward the human defensive line. Their shields glowed brightly in the morning light. Hold your fire until they're in range, Frank ordered through the radio. Let them think their new machines are invincible. The walkers approached, firing energy weapons that destroyed everything they touched. When they were 500 yards away, Frank gave the signal. Now. From hidden positions, soldiers fired not rifles but something much larger. The loud boom of anti-tank rifles from World War II echoed across the battlefield. The heavy bullets punched through the walkers' shields and into their control systems. 3 walkers fell in the first volley. The others stopped, confused by the unexpected attack. Second wave fire, Frank called. This time Dr. Parker's new railguns opened up. The hybrid weapons fired metal slugs with tremendous force, tearing through the walker's armor as if it were paper. In his command ship, High General Kavar watched the footage with horror. His most advanced combat units were being destroyed by humans using what looked like museum pieces and crude homemade weapons. Impossible, he whispered, smashing his tactical display. By midday, the Proximan offensive had collapsed. 28 of their 30 combat walkers lay destroyed in the field. Human forces had suffered losses but held their ground. They'll try something else, Frank warned as they surveyed the battlefield. They still control orbit. General Rodriguez nodded. Then we take the fight to them. Dr. Parker's team had completed work on the retrograde missiles. They looked strange, like old rocket designs but built with some Proximan components. No electronics for them to detect or jam, Dr. Parker explained. They use mechanical guidance, systems with physical gyroscopes. The warheads are simple kinetic penetrators, basically giant bullets designed to punch through their hull materials. Will they work? Frank asked. Physics doesn't care about technological advancement, Doctor. Parker replied. A big enough object moving fast enough will damage anything it hits, shields or no shields. Earth launched the missiles from hidden silos. The Proximan ships in orbit detected the launches, but were confused by the lack of electronic signatures. They tried to intercept with energy weapons, but their targeting systems were designed for modern threats, not primitive rockets. 5 missiles reached Kavar's flagship. The kinetic penetrators punched through the ship's hull, causing massive damage. "We've been hit," an officer shouted. "Multiple hull breaches." Kavar steadied himself as the ship shuddered. How? How did they penetrate our defenses? "They used physical projectiles," the officer said, sounding confused by his own words. "No guidance systems we could detect, no energy signatures, just metal objects moving at high velocity." Kavar finally understood the fatal flaw in the Proximan strategy. They had evolved their technology so far beyond physical weapons that they had forgotten the simple principles that still governed the physical universe. No matter how advanced their shields, they couldn't stop what they weren't designed to stop. On Earth, Frank watched through a telescope as flashes of light erupted from the Proximan flagship. "Direct hits," he said. "They're damaged, but still functional." "Then we need to finish this," Rodriguez said. "We need to take that ship." Frank looked at her in surprise. "Take it? How?" "The same way we've been winning on the ground, with weapons so old they don't know how to defend against them." That night, Frank met with a small team of volunteers. "This is Operation Flintlock," he told them. "We're going to board their flagship and end this invasion once and for all." Operation Flintlock began under cover of darkness. 3 Earthships rose into the night sky. They were old space shuttles stripped of modern electronics and retrofitted with simple mechanical controls. The ships carried 40 soldiers, led by Frank Holloway. Each soldier carried weapons that would have looked at home in a museum: shotguns, lever-action rifles, revolvers, and even bows and arrows. Frank himself carried a pump-action shotgun and an old Colt revolver. On his back was a modern crossbow. "Remember, no energy weapons," Frank told his team as their shuttle approached the damaged Proximan flagship. "Nothing they can detect or block. We go in quiet and fast." Admiral Sandra Powell coordinated the mission from Earth. "Their shields are still damaged from our missile strikes," she reported through the radio. "You should be able to dock at the maintenance bay on the underside." The shuttles approached silently. Without electronic signals, they appeared as mere debris to the Proximan sensors. They landed in the maintenance bay, and the boarding teams moved out. Inside the alien ship, red emergency lights bathed the corridors in an eerie glow. The human soldiers moved carefully, their old weapons ready. At the first intersection, they encountered Proximan guards. The aliens, surprised to see humans aboard their ship, activated their shields and raised their energy weapons. "Fire," Frank ordered quietly. Shotguns boomed in the enclosed space. The buckshot passed through the alien shields as if they weren't there. 6 Proximans fell before they could return fire. "Move," Frank said. "They'll know we're here now." The team pushed deeper into the ship, following the route they had planned using schematics from captured Proximan data devices. Their goal was the bridge where High General Kavar commanded the invasion. In his command center, Kavar received the alert. "Humans? On my ship? Impossible." "It's confirmed, sir," an officer reported. "They've breached the maintenance level and are moving toward central control." "How many?" "Sensors show nothing, sir. They appear to be using no electronic equipment at all." Kavar slammed all 4 of his hands on the console. "Send the elite guard, all of them. Protect the bridge at all costs." Throughout the flagship, the human teams encountered increasing resistance. The Proximans fought bravely but were consistently surprised when their shields failed to stop the primitive human weapons. Frank's group approached a large door. "Bridge access," said Amy Winters, now his second in command. "But it's sealed." Frank nodded to a soldier carrying an old canvas bag. "Plan B." The soldier removed several sticks of dynamite, chemical explosives that had changed little in hundreds of years. He placed them around the door seal and lit the fuse with a match. "Take cover," Frank called. The explosion ripped the door from its frame. Through the smoke, Frank's team charged onto the bridge. High General Kavar stood at the center, surrounded by his elite guard. All had their shields at maximum power. "You humans are persistent," Kavar said, his translator making his voice sound metallic and cold. "But this ends now." The elite guard opened fire with their disintegration weapons. Two human soldiers vanished instantly. The humans returned fire. Shotguns, rifles, and pistols roared in the confined space. The elite guards fell one by one, their shields useless against the physical bullets. Soon only Kivar remained standing. The High General activated his personal shield and drew an energy blade that hummed with power. "Your primitive weapons brought you this far," Kivar said, advancing toward Frank. "But I am the greatest warrior of the Proximan Empire. My shield is the most powerful ever created. No energy weapon in the galaxy can penetrate it." Frank lowered his shotgun. "That's the problem with you Proximans. You're so advanced you forgot the basics." Kivar laughed. The same metallic chiming sound Frank had heard months ago when the aliens had mocked human firearms. "And what basics would those be, human?" Frank calmly set down his shotgun and drew the crossbow from his back. "Physics doesn't care how advanced you are." He fired in one smooth motion. The crossbow bolt flew straight and true, passing through Kivar's shield and into his chest. The alien general looked down in shock at the simple wooden shaft protruding from his body. "Impossible," Kivar whispered as he fell to his knees. Frank stepped forward. "Sometimes the oldest technology is the most reliable." With the High General defeated, Frank's team secured the bridge. They used the ship's communication system to broadcast to all Proximan forces. Their leader was dead, the flagship captured, and humanity would not surrender. "They're standing down," Admiral Powell reported from Earth. "Proximan ships are retreating from orbit." 3 months later, Frank Holloway stood in the newly expanded National Firearms Museum. A new wing had been added, weapons that saved Earth. It displayed the actual firearms used in key battles against the Proximans. President Owen Martinez spoke at the opening ceremony. "We faced an enemy so advanced they had forgotten the simple things. Their arrogance became their weakness. They laughed at our old weapons, never imagining those same weapons would defeat them." After the ceremony, Frank noticed a young Proximan watching him from across the room. Unlike the warriors, this one was smaller, with softer features. The alien approached cautiously. "You are Frank Holloway?" the Proximan asked through a translator device. Frank nodded. I am Drell, a student from the new Proximan Diplomatic School. I was sent to learn about humans." Frank studied the young alien. "And what have you learned so far?" "That we gravely misunderstood your species. We saw your older technology and thought, 'You primitive.' We did not understand that keeping knowledge of the past can be a form of wisdom." The young Proximan gestured to a revolver in a nearby display case. "This simple device defeated our most advanced shields." "Simple doesn't mean weak," Frank said. "Sometimes it means reliable." Drell tilted his head. "The new treaty requires our civilizations to share knowledge. My teachers said I should study human history to understand how you think." "A good start," Frank agreed. The young Proximan looked at the revolver again. "Will you teach me how it works?" Frank smiled. "I'd be happy to." As they walked through the museum, Frank explained the mechanics of firearms from flintlocks to modern designs. The young alien listened carefully, asking thoughtful questions. Outside the museum, Earth was rebuilding. The Proximan Empire had signed a peace treaty, revising their assessment of Earth from too primitive to bother with to dangerously unpredictable. Earth's military had established a new defense doctrine, combining advanced technology with what they called retrograde contingencies. Older technologies kept in reserve for when the newest systems failed. As Frank finished his tour with the young Proximan, he pointed to the museum's motto, newly carved above the entrance. "Remember the past. It may save your future."